This video is about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which is also known as the UNDRIP. The goal of this video is to educate Native Americans, American Indians, Natives, and Indigenous peoples about what the UNDRIP is and how it can help Indigenous peoples living in the U.S. Who are Indigenous peoples? Indigenous peoples are descendants of the original people, are occupants of lands before these lands were taken over or conquered by others. For example, in the southwest of the United States, Diné, Apache, and Pueblos were the original people to the area. Many indigenous peoples have maintained their traditional cultures and identities, like the way of dressing, language, and the cultivation of land. Therefore, they have a strong and deep connection with their ancestral homelands, cultures, and identities. What is a declaration? A declaration is an agreement that countries put together about a specific issue. A declaration tells governments what they must do or not do around such an issue. What is the United Nations? The United Nations, also known as the UN, is an international organization that was founded in 1945 after the Second World War by 51 countries. The UN headquarters are located in New York City. Today, the UN now consists of 193 countries. The UN is a place for countries to talk about and make decisions about important issues. The UN helps to keep peace among countries and helps governments work together. The countries that are part of the UN are called member states. The member states make decisions in the UN General Assembly. Some of these decisions are documented as declarations like the UNDRIP. What is the UNDRIP? The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is a declaration that contains an agreement among countries on how Indigenous peoples should be treated. In 1985, a working group began drafting the UNDRIP. It took over 20 years for the declaration to be formally adopted by the UN General Assembly. The UNDRIP was adopted September 13, 2007. It took so long because it was difficult for some countries to agree on the contents of the UNDRIP. At the time of the vote, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States voted against the UNDRIP, and 11 countries decided not to vote. Since the original vote in 2007, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States have decided to support the UNDRIP. These countries voted against the UNDRIP because these countries would have to acknowledge how badly Indigenous peoples are treated in their countries. The UNDRIP sets out how countries and their governments should respect human rights of Indigenous peoples. The UNDRIP consists of 46 sections that describe specific rights and actions that countries must take to protect these rights. The important topics of the UNDRIP are 1. The right to self-determination, 2. The right to be recognized as distinct peoples, 3. The right to free, prior, and informed consent, and 4. The right to be free of discrimination. The right to self-determination is fundamental to Indigenous peoples. The right to self-determination generally means that Indigenous peoples have the right to decide what is best for them and their communities. For example, tribal governments can make their own decisions on issues like healthcare and environment and carry out programs as they see fit. The right to cultural identity is important to Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples are equal to all other peoples, but they also have the right to be different. For example, Indigenous peoples show their cultural identity in the way that they dress, the food they eat, and in the language they speak. The right to free, prior, and informed consent is critical for Indigenous peoples. Free, prior, and informed consent means that Indigenous peoples have the right to be consulted and make decisions on any matter that may affect their communities. For example, energy companies and federal governments have to consult with Indigenous peoples before energy projects like mining and fracking begin in their community. Protection from discrimination is vital for Indigenous peoples. The right to be free from discrimination means that governments must ensure that Indigenous peoples and individuals are treated the same way as other people regardless of sex, disability, or religion. Indigenous peoples from all over the world have been working for decades with the United Nations for the recognition of their rights. This is only an introduction about the UNDRIP. For the full text of the UNDRIP, go to bit.ly/UNDRIP. Also, for more information about the UNDRIP, go to www.indianlaw.org/UNDRIP/home. This video was put together by the Native American Voters Alliance. For more information about the Native American Voters Alliance, visit www.nativevotersalliance.org.